Pleasant good morning to each and every one of you. I love singing hymns. You know, at Phoebius we also use hymn. And but sometimes I need to tell them that they need to sing it well. And sing it from the bottom of their hearts. And this morning, really appreciate our singing this morning, singing of him. You know, when I was at Westminster Seminary in California, I played the piano, and Dr. Birdsma was the one leading singing, and it's just amazing how these people, sang the hymns. As if we wouldn't like to leave our chapel every time we sing hymns. And I trust that, and I trust all churches should do the same. And but unfortunately, they love to sing all these songs that are, I'll say, sometimes not theologically accurate. Our topic this morning has something to do with the futility of the flesh. And we read our two passages from Genesis chapter 16 and the Galatians 4. Years before we have the story in chapter 16. So 10 years, God graciously and sovereignly called Abraham into the land of Canaan. He comes into the land of promise. 10 years before this, he was 75 years old, and Sarah was probably 66 years old, and they come into the land. And God promised Abraham a number of things, such as he would have a seed that would become a mighty nation. That they would possess the land. In that land, the nations of the earth will bless themselves. And Abraham has to live by faith to possess the land and to wait on the purposes of God. We know that he is in the land, and God continues to stretch him by testing his faith. And on that test, Abraham does well. In other tests, he failed, and yet God is faithfully pursuing his purposes. He is making Abraham and Sarah wait because they are getting up there. Many years, they don't have children. For many, many years, Sarah was barren. She has been unable to conceive a child. In chapter 15, God said, "Do not fear, Abraham, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." And notice the answer of Abraham. Abraham said, "O Lord God, what will you give me since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer?" Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, "Since you have given no offspring to me, one born in my house is heir." You see, Abraham recognized for all the promise of God come to pass, there has to be a seed through whom the promised land would be fulfilled, and ultimately the seed who would defeat the enemy and deliver his people from their sins. So he said, how can that be? How can that be? There is no seed. Do I adopt somebody? And God comes back. No. Absolutely no. It is going to be your own seed. It is going to be a son born of your loins, and Abraham believes that. And that is a great declaration then, that salvation is reckoned to us righteousness. That God declared us righteous as we believe His promise of salvation. God said, I am going to give you seed, more numerous than all stars in the sky, and they are going to possess the land. Abraham said, how will I know that? How will I know that? What will be the proof? And we know that in chapter 15, verses 9 to 11. What is the significance of this? God made a covenant with Abraham. God was saying to Abraham, if I ever do not do what I am saying I am going to do to you with this covenant, what did God say? Let me be destroyed. Let me not be God. And of course, that is impossible. God slowly spells it out. There is going to be a seed. It is not going to be an adopted seed. It is going to be born of Abraham. Another question is, another problem, how about Sarah? Sarah, who is also wrestling in faith with the promise of God. The story we have today really grows out of Sarah's wrestling with the promise of God and the apparent inactivity in God's part, or on God's part. Here we see the futility of trusting in human means to accomplish God's purpose. God warns you and me. God warns us about the danger of trusting in wrong things to accomplish His purposes. Think a little bit more on Sarah's predicament. She is now, if Abraham is 85, that means she is about 75 years old. And her biological clock is quickly ticking down. She has been barren. For all her best years for having children. And probably, back in her days, she knows getting up then at 75 years old is a kind of middle age. But now her clock is gone off.